So that's a kind of great transition into my next question, because on page 64, you said Muslims who want to stand up to oppression are resorting to forms of violence that have no real place in the religion. For instance, nowhere does the religion justify killing of innocent lives, wherever and however. Alternatively, Muslims who are not oppressed are deeply invested in the religion, are caught up in a sincere, compulsive loop of only perfecting their rituals when unfortunately their hearts are still majorly rooted in the love of materialism, and the major portion of them is sincerely depressed. So feel free to expand on what you were saying before, but in your opinion, what is the path to thinking about these issues properly and fixing these issues?
I think, first of all, we just need to really recognize and identify this bipolarity in our communities, and really recognize, I mean, what I'm really trying to say here is that as much as what we are seeing on the stage of the world in the name of Islam, when people are killing innocent beings, that is definitely never justified by the religion in any shape or form, first of all. But second of all, what about people like myself, an average everyday person? What is wrong with what we are doing? And we are also a contributor to what is going on. And why is that the case? Because we are just as much invested in our own self gains and materialism, and yet we claim to be really spiritual, and we claim to be really an adherent of the faith. And one conclusion that I've drawn there is that I think probably one of the problems here is that we are just caught up on perfecting our rituals, whereas we are missing the whole game here. That really, I mean, the analogy I like to draw here is that if this is God and this is your life, then essentially you're running your life as you want to run it, but then you're trying to see that, okay, where does the Lord fit into my life? In the flow of my life, where is Lord? Okay, I have to pray, I do my work, I do everything, but okay, I have to fit my prayers in, I have to fit my fasting in, whatnot. Whereas what is supposed to be the case is that this is your Lord and this is your life, and you are supposed to run your life around the Lord rather than just trying to find the Lord as a side figure that you just fit in wherever and however, which is, in my opinion, the biggest problem, that we are as consumed in materialism, but yet we are perfecting our rituals day in and day out. And we are not recognizing that as much as we are sincerely connecting to faith in a deep ritualistic way, at the heart of it, we are still sucked into the love of this, love of materialism and things around us. And then I'm also calling about a major community which is sincerely depressed, because there is definitely a whole set of the community who is really caught up in a compulsive way of perfecting things without recognizing, unfortunately, that they're just compulsively doing things because they just are fed into doing these things, or they are just, taught into doing those things every day. And I'm calling that they are sincerely depressed in that sense, because they're not recognizing that what they are doing exactly.
So I'm curious, because I have my own thoughts on this. But you talk about the dichotomy between faith and materialism. From your point of view, what is the proper relationship the Muslim should have with the material world?
I mean, I love the quote that Sheikh Hamza Yusuf said, that you can have this world as long as you remove the love of dunya from this world, as long as it's in your heart and it's not in your hands. So, as long as it's in your hands and not in your hearts, sorry. So as long as you are using it for your benefit, but it's not consuming you. So if it's all gone from me, I'm fine. I'm not shattered by it. Today we are shattered by the things that we are holding on to. If my house is gone, if my job is gone, if my money is gone, I'm over. If my family is gone, or if I don't have a family, I'm over. But no, the thing is that they should be in your hands and not in your hearts.
Yeah.
And that is really the way of getting out of this loop of materialism. And then obviously just cutting those cords as much as you can. Like, if you don't need certain things, don't do them. Don't do them for peer pressure. And I'm including myself in this. I'm not just saying that, I'm above any of this. I'm just saying that we are running this run of life in a way of just sucking to a lot of peer pressure around us, just what we have been brought up to, our cultural norms, things that we feel that, we should have to do, we have to do, either in the name of self-care, either in the name of impressing the world, whatever it is, But sometimes we are just going way beyond the need of the hour.
Yeah, so kind of living, beyond your needs, kind of becoming consumed with it in your heart. For your own reason. One thing that's interesting to me, and I'm not really sure how much tangible effect it has on how these things lived out, but my understanding in Islamically is that Adam and Eve were created in paradise, and then were sent down to the world, the dunya. Would that be your understanding of it?
Well, I've actually written a full chapter on that, on the hereafter. I think that it's called the hereafter. I think I'd renamed that chapter originally to be called the meaning of life, where I do say that we have to go back to the first principles, which is that Prophet Adam and his wife Eve were created. They were created for the world. They were not created for the heaven. They were created for the earth. But then there was a test in front of them, where they were tested, and because the final goal was always to send this creation on the earth. They were created for this planet, and that is conclusive based on the conversation that the Lord has with the angels, where he does say that I'll create a vicegerent on earth, and they said that will you place somebody who will cause a lot of mischief and shed blood? And the deal is that when Allah is saying that, okay, I'm going to send this caliph on earth, and he's not saying that I'm going to send them into the heaven and they're going to live in the heaven forever. I mean, the whole deal here was just to give them a taste of the afterlife, a taste of perfection before they were going to be sent on the earth.
Okay, that actually makes sense. Did you know that Christians believe that man and woman were created on earth, and earth itself was paradise?
Okay.
And then because of sin, that paradise became the world like it is now. And eternity in the Bible is actually also on earth as well.
Okay.
Not that that's a justification to be attached to it, because it's the same. The Bible thinks about these things in the same way. That love of money, love of the world is the source of all sorts of problem. Like Jesus says, don't lay up treasure in heaven where moths eat and rust decays, but store up for yourself treasures in heaven.
Right.
It's very much in the biblical mindset as well, not to kind of become consumed with the world. But it is an interesting balance to walk, because again, we are put here. This is our home, and we have to do good with what we have here.
Right.
For the glory of God and the good of other people.
Right.
But it's a fine line to walk to use it and not become consumed by it.
Right.
So let's say we have somebody who thinks, okay, take the average Muslim living in Bellevue who thinks, okay, I've decided I'm doing the rituals, but I am too materialistic. What do you think the path available on Amazon is to kind of getting back to a right sense of how you live in the world?
I don't know. I mean, I'll just say that when I was purchasing my place in Bellevue, I was so consumed by it that part of it was like I cannot live in a sub-inferior community. And my dad told me in that time that if you believed in God, once you start believing in God, places and locations and appearances will not matter to you that much, which was quite interesting, because I go back to it. And I'm not trying to say that you have to sacrifice quality of living in the name of materialism, but I'm just saying that there is a sense of, okay, who am I? Like, I mean, if I'm just living a basic life because, yes, I'm getting quality care, quality resources in this area, I think it's okay to enjoy or to accept the gifts of God. But at the end of the day, you also have to be aware that, okay, am I completely ignorant of my neighbors, which I think I am. I mean, I try my best to feed some of my concierges and somebody else, but I don't really know who my neighbors are. They might be going, they might not be eating, they might not have enough to eat, they might not have enough resources. And actually, this was a truth during COVID, which we discovered, that I started posting on my regular community channel in my apartment building, which is a very wealthy building. And the last thing that you would think is that somebody would actually be going to sleep hungry there. And then I recognized that actually there is a set of tenants in that building who were just renting an apartment there, and they did not have food, or they would just take everything and anything, which is quite an interesting revelation to me that, look, there you go. Like, we just believe that we are living in a filthy rich neighborhood, so people don't have those problems that an average person may have in a substandard community, but that's not true. So if I have to step above materialism, I mean, the first thing is that I need to remove that love of the place from my head and heart. I mean, I don't have to attach myself with Bellevue, with the area. First of all, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, I should not care. I mean, in our community, there is this trend at some level that, oh, if you don't live in this big house or if you don't live in this neighborhood, you are automatically a substandard person. We need to remove that notion. I mean, that is cutting ties from materialism, right? But I have to do that in my heart and head and not be worried about what the world is going to say. And then I think the second thing is that even if I'm continuing to live in a place like that, I should not be, there are so many other avenues. Like, do I feed my neighbors? Do I know who those people are? Am I connecting with them? And am I interacting with the broader society? Or am I looking at people who don't have the same wealth as I do? Am I inferiorly looking at them? Am I considering them an inferior? Because then also that is also a part of being materialistic, that I am feeling like, yes, I have something that you don't have, and it's so, I'm automatically superior and you are not, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's living in a big city like this is an interesting dichotomy.
Right.
Because you can kind of think, okay, well, I could be living in I could be paying much less money to live and live somewhere else. But at the same time, living somewhere like this brings so many opportunities to do good as well.
It really does. And honestly, I have done my own calculations, and actually living where I'm living today is the cheapest place for me to live in.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Because, I mean, it has been many, many years, like given how fast-paced this area has become. But what I'm saying now is that now that I have that avenue covered, whether I move out of there or not, at least I should try to use the resources that I have and try to spread them in the world. Like, I should at least recognize that there is a set of community who are my neighbors, who are my community members, or whatever precedence of order in which you want to approach people or obligations. But it should not be just about that, okay, now I made it to Bellevue, so there you go. I'm just living and dying in this fame and pride.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. We got this place at the very end of 2017, and it was it was over budget for us at the time. But now it's like the cheapest place we could possibly live in the city.
Exactly right. Yes.
Yeah. So I again, there's so many challenges to living in a city. Everyone's detached from each other. Everybody's busy, but in some ways that just makes it all the more important for people to actually live here and being invested in other people's lives as well.
I think the first and foremost thing we have to do is make that intention and clean our hearts in a way where we really need to remove the sense of superiority from ourselves or materialism. Maybe it's not superiority, maybe it's just the love of materialism, and then be okay with living with less. Like, if I don't have the best of something, if I don't have everything perfect, that should be fine. I mean, for instance, I'm not bragging here, but I drive a very basic car. For me, cars have never been a big thing. I've always driven a very basic sedan. And my thing there is that that's one place where I don't spend my money and where I have the least of my expenses. But then there is a set of people who really look down upon me many times, because this area is all about like Mercedes and Beamers and whatnot, right? So, I mean, something like that just learn to let go of things that really, don't do them for the sake of peer pressure. Don't do them because you have to, you must, you somehow this is a midlife crisis and I have to suck up to this and I have to keep up with this. I mean, there are so many people who are in trouble, or even, I don't want to advocate for anybody where they should spend their money or not, but I'm just saying that even just detaching your heart from those things is a big thing, is the first thing.
Yeah.
And don't judge people who don't have it.
Yeah, I think the way I sort of started thinking about these things a few years ago is I was always kind of on this kind of trying to figure out, okay, how much is too much to have, how much is not too much to have, and I think what I kind of realized in the Bible is that God is described as being like a generous father, that He likes giving good gifts to our children, His children, and what He wants us to do is let that generosity flow through us to other people. So God doesn't want you to live a life without good things in it,
right?
But He doesn't want you to become consumed by those things. So the way I sort of started approaching this is, all right, what are the things I should be doing as a Christian? Right? I should always be making time for God. Then I should be making time for my marriage. I should make sure I'm invested in the lives of my children. I should make sure that we're connected to religious community, we should make sure that we're being generous to people. And if those things are all kind of present, then I think you're basically, I really believe you're free to be able to enjoy the things you've been given.
Right.
But the orbit of your life has to start with God, and then then priorities like around that.
Right.
And then, but once you've done that, then there's immense amounts of freedom to be able to enjoy the world God has given you.
Right.
But as long as you're letting Him decide the order of.
I mean, there is a
what's important to you.
clear prayer in the Quran which says that there are people who ask for the worldly benefits, and then there are people who ask for the otherworldly benefits, and the best are those who ask for the best of both worlds. You know, it's a clear thing. So, and then there is like the story of Prophet Solomon, who was a rich king, who was like a prophet of God, but yet he was rich beyond bounds, essentially, which I think our community in this day and age is. Or if you look at many Muslim countries, that's what they reflect. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being blessed or earning a good living or wanting a good living. But at the end of the day, it boils down to what you do with it, what is in your heart. I mean, are you full of pride and arrogance because now you have earned this living and now because you have all this? Or you are using it for the benefit of others or yourself or your family or your priorities in the way of God, right?
That's King Solomon's a very interesting one.
Right.
Because that's actually a minor difference in the sort of Christian and Muslim way of thinking about these things. So in Deuteronomy, which is written by Moses in the Torah, there's a prophecy that says, when you have a king that reigns over you, you may have a king, but he shall not acquire many horses, he shall not acquire much gold, and he shall not acquire many wives. So essentially, the way the Bible outlines Solomon's life is he has immense wisdom and then gains immense wealth.
Right.
But that wealth ultimately corrupts him. And he actually ends up worshipping other gods and the world. But then he actually writes a book called Ecclesiastes, where he talks about, it's an amazing book. You should absolutely read it if you have the opportunity. It's not very long, but it's written directly by Solomon. And it's a book all about the vanity of chasing pleasure and riches and all of that. And so the biblical narrative has Solomon rising, riches corrupt him and distract him.
Right.
He falls, but then before the end, he actually repents and gets a proper perspective on life again. Yeah. But Ecclesiastes it's only 12 chapters long, but it's amazing.
Right. Yeah.
So it's fascinating. So, a couple of other things you hit on in the book, which are interesting, and we have time because it's the after show. So, you talked about you had a whole chapter about headscarves, and so why do you think there is so much focus on headscarves in today's world?
I mean, I think before I answer the question, I want to just give the context that I've written a chapter on headscarf because it's been one of the major struggles of my life personally, and I've always struggled with the notion of it. And I've really tried to be fair for the sake of my sanity, or to be able to answer God on the day of judgment, that what have I done or not for this effort. And in that, I've tried to be fair to my learnings on whether the Quran mandates a headscarf or not, and what is the majority scholarly opinion, which is that the headscarf is mandatory, and the minority scholarly opinion, which says that covering of the chest is obligatory, whereas covering of the hair is not mentioned in the verse of the Quran. So I have really tried to strive for that balance and put that out there. And then I go into talking about the headscarf today, where I say that how the headscarf is now no longer just an act of piety and a covering, but it has become a symbol of Islam. And we have to really talk about this problem or this issue when we are talking about the headscarf, that what can a headscarf mean for different demographics, for different set of women, and for different set of women, for instance, just like myself, who suffer from a lot of claustrophobia, if nothing else. So to your question of why is there so much emphasis on the headscarf, I mean, I think that unfortunately it's an unfortunate thing that we have really taken the headscarf out of its proportion, and we have kind of inflated its value over and above everything. Now, why has that happened? I don't know the historical rootings of that. But I was thinking through it, and in my opinion, there are two main reasons why that ends up happening. It's because of guilt, and it happens because of peer pressure. Because somehow over the last 20, 30, 40 years, somehow there has been this notion that a woman's piety is only and only measurable by what she wears and how she appears. And the headscarf is the big part there. And somehow that focus creates a sense of subliminal guilt and pressure inside of you that to be part of the faith, I should be covering, I should be wearing the headscarf. And it's fine. I mean, I'm not, as I'm saying that, I'm not saying that the headscarf is not important or necessary, but my problem is with the fact that it's just weighed way much out of proportion. The other solution, other answer to your question there is that I think somehow we just attach more value to things we see, to things that are visible. Now, I was thinking this morning in context of answering your question that if, let's say that we moved to a world tomorrow with AI or something where I was carrying a metadata of my deeds with me in front of me, and everything was visible, that how many prayers do I pray, how much do I lie, how much do I fast, and do I cover or do I not cover, and if all those metrics were there in front of me and I could see it and the world could see it, probably the headscarf would be as neutral of a thing as anything else. That, oh yeah, oh, she doesn't pray, but okay, so she's covering, so big deal. Or oh, she's lying, you know. But because we cannot see the inner character of a person on face value, because we don't know what their relationship with their Lord really is, somehow there is this attachment to appearances which has inflated itself, and people over the years have just gone. And I think this also goes back to our compulsive nature of attaching yourself to the rituals, where you just are doing things now out of peer pressure, that I want to be sincere in faith, and I really want to, when people really sincerely want to go and be part of a faith community and really be genuinely good. Nobody's saying that they're doing this out of something wrong or whatever, but the thing is that there is a peer pressure now that, oh, she is doing it, so I should do it, and oh, I'll feel so much better, and I'll feel so much gratified. And then there is a immediate gratification that also comes with it, you know. Somehow the society starts feeding this in you, that, oh, she's so much better, oh, look at her, you know, she's now so much pure, she's so much pious. But what we forget is what's on the inside.
So in fact, that to me, that sounds like, I very much believe that sometimes an overemphasis on external things can actually be a massive hindrance to having like a genuine internal.
It can make a difference, and I've written another article on the taboo of removing the taboo on the half and half hijab, and that is on my blog site, where I just write articles here and there on faith, and I wrote that for myself too, mainly. And I'm not trying to expose my sins, as somebody once called out to me when reading that article, but the deal there was to just show a struggle of this time, that I genuinely struggle with the morning prayers. I really have a hard time waking up to the Fajr prayer. But at the same time, I cover my hair on many occasions. I do. I mean, there was a period of my life when I was doing it 24/7. Now also I'm trying to do it in occasions and times when I can. But that does not change my struggle of waking up to the Fajr prayer. Now, somebody looking at me in that headscarf mode will be like, look at her, what an awesome woman, what an awesome Muslim. Maybe they may not. Maybe they may just know me inside out, and they may be like, okay, now she's portraying herself as a Muslim and her inside is all corrupted. Like, it's quite possible too. But I'm just saying that unfortunately, we are not able to see that balance, and we have to again come to that conclusion for ourselves and from ourselves, because we are going to be accountable for what we are doing, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. So it sounds like whenever you talk about these things, you get a lot of flack for speaking your mind on these things, or just a lot of flack, or like a lot of people trying to critique what you're saying?
No, I don't think so. I think that, as I said, that I wrote this chapter on headscarf for myself because it has been a major struggle of my life. And before I published this particular article, or actually for the whole book, that's true that before I published the book in a book setting, I was actually publishing chapters here and there all over Facebook and some other email groups and whatnot. And people in sincere faith came around and said things to the effect that, maybe you are seeing things this way, but maybe this is another reality of it. And that is the case because for many, many, many women, which is the case, that the headscarf is very intuitive and it's very easy. I think another thing to your point about why is the headscarf given so much importance, one notion we had back in the day was we would always hear this narrative that, oh, the biggest struggle a woman has is to cover her hair, whereas everything else is just easy. Somehow there was a sense that we don't cover because that takes up so much effort, but that's not true. There could be other things that may consume me more than somebody else. For somebody else, the headscarf may be very intuitive and very easy. And in this day and age where people want to stand out and represent their religion and represent themselves, somehow there is an act of passion associated with it that, oh, I want to tell to the world that this is who I am and I belong in this community,
Yeah.
So then they take it to another level too. But then there is a set of people for whom, like, okay, it's just easy and it's not easy. So do I get a lot of remarks and critiques? Yes, I do. I don't. Sometimes, obviously, I have also learned in my process of writing this book and other pieces and blogs and emails and whatnot on various groups and forums. Yes, there are people of all sorts. But I think I also have learned from what they have had to say, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think unless you have to defend your ideas, it's very difficult to shape them properly.
Right.
So one thing you talked about in the book is mental health. You had a significant section on that, and this is something I'm very interested in because I think in modern secular society, like absolutely everything becomes a mental health issue. But then some religious people, and I experience this in Christianity and in Islam, want to make everything some sort of spiritual issue. What do you think the proper balance is? Because you're a modern woman who believes in mental health and you're a practicing Muslim, and what do you think the proper boundary and approach to these things is?
I think it's just recognizing that mental health is no different than physical health. And I think we have sort of we have come further on that game a little bit more, especially post-COVID, because now in social settings, people are very openly talking about mental health. And I wrote another article on that one too on my blog, that how you would go to a setting, to a social setting or to a public setting, and it's not a deal in emails that are sent out or travel advisories that are sent out. It's like, look after yourself. And then even in our work setting, for instance, we get all these messages on like, these are the resources we are offering to employees and these are your benefits and whatnot. That means the world is becoming more aware and open. And I think so are the spiritual communities at some level. But where they are not, they just need to recognize and learn that, there is really no difference between mental health and physical health.
The thing my concern with a lot of the mental health angle on things in this time and place is I think it's a valid category to explore, but I think personally I think 200 years from now, the way we deal with mental health people will look at us the same way we look at people who use like leeches in the Middle Ages. Like, I think there's just, like, for example, like schizophrenia. No one really knows what schizophrenia is, or depression. For the last 10 years, I've heard people talk about depression being a chemical imbalance in the brain. And they just released a major study this year kind of debunking the idea that it's a chemical imbalance. Now, again, I believe in depression, but I don't think nobody really knows what causes it, and
Right.
nobody really knows how to fix it
Right.
yet either. So I think but I think what religious people can be prone to doing is, well, look, secular science doesn't have any answers after all. We were right the whole time. And no, not necessarily.
I think the problem sometimes we have with the spiritual set of things, especially if we are talking a decade ago or 2 decades ago, there was some kind of a sentiment that if you're suffering, if something is wrong with you in your life, if you are mentally suffering or you are in some depression or whatever, hold on to the book of the Lord. And that is perfect. That is great. I'm not denying any of that. But there was also sort of a thing to say that was the only way to go about it. And to deal with your stress in any other way is just like outside of the boundaries of the religion. And that is where I think people need to really recognize that that's not correct. And I think we have made those advances, and you and I just talking so openly about this is an advance in this topic, right? We are openly bringing this up as if it's not a deal.
Yeah.
So we have already kind of transcended that issue to begin with, and hopefully it will get better by the day. That's my understanding. But also there are communities where people don't talk that openly, and we need to take it to them.
So let's push this the other way. Let's take the average Seattleite who 100% believes in mental health, but has no belief in the metaphysical or the spiritual. What would you say to that person?
I mean, I think mental health or any way of pursuing any part of medical science has its limits too. We have to recognize that. And you do recognize that eventually, that whatever treatment you go with, whatever illness or casualty you are suffering from, at the end of the day, there is a limit to how far medical science takes you. You know, like there are reactions from medications, there are side effects from medications, there are contradictory opinions, there are other things that happen to you. And you just have to recognize that anything that you are doing for your mental health is just a resource in and of itself. The goal here is to say that, okay, access this resource, don't diminish, don't not access this resource because you are part of a faith community. The goal is that please use this resource in addition to being part of the faith community. But now to say that, okay, I'm part of this resource community and I have access to all these well-being resources and I'm above there and I know everything and I'm better off and I don't need the religion, that is also a problem, because now you're just making something, you're inflating something in and of itself, and you will recognize that there's a limit to it. There, you know, in one way or another, somehow or the other, you will recognize that not everything works for you all the time. Not everybody has all the answers. You are still depressed no matter how many meds you take or whatever you do. So, I mean, that is just the end game of it. But sort of you still start realizing the importance of spirituality in your life and the need for spirituality in your life, right?
Yeah. So I think what a medication can do is it can help with symptoms. What a medication cannot do is give you purpose. Unless you develop a serious addiction, then it kind of becomes your purpose. But no one wants that.
But I also feel that sometimes they also help you identify your purpose, because you could be so jaded, right? And they uplift your depression or whatever you're suffering from, right? That now you're able to see that purpose. Or I mean, some people, when they say that, okay, just read the Quran because 10, 20 years, 30 years from now, depression is going to be multiplied to some degree because of everything that's going to come through. My answer there is that, yes, read the Quran. But if you are not going to be depressed, you will read that Quran in the right way. You will be able to infer more out of that Quran. You will be able to see things from the Quran the way it's actually talking to you and saying, and you will be able to act on that Quran if you're not depressed, you know, hopefully.
Yeah. So I think that you got to be able to have a way to find purpose ultimately. Like a lot of the depression going around in the time and place we live in is because I think people feel sort of shallow and disconnected from any meaning.
Exactly.
And I think, I think that's part of the problem with secular humanism, is that you basically have to, and the time and place we live in, the cultural moment is, well, you find your own meaning. And I believe that God has made everyone as an individual to have their own individual life, but you can't find your own meaning. You can find your own kind of niche, but as far as you actually made objectively for something. Like God Himself has created you for a purpose,
right?
And and that comes in levels. On the first hand, there's the reason God made everybody, which is to glorify Himself, and so we can enjoy Him forever. But then also, and to represent good over evil in the world. To obey God and to trust Him and to live a life of faith, right? Those are kind of, everyone is made for that. But then there's the individual things God has made you specifically for.
Well, I just want to say to that I don't think God has made Himself. I think God has just existed forever.
No, I didn't say He made Himself. I said He made us to glorify Himself, right? So He made us. God has always existed. He created human beings for the sake of His own glory,
right?
Basically,
right.
Not that He created Himself.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming. It's been
thank you. I hope this was helpful.
Yeah, it was great. It was a good conversation. I'll publish this in a couple of weeks, and I'll let you know as soon as that happens.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for listening to the Almighty Initiative podcast.
Yeah.